Hi everyone and welcome to Hit the Apex. This week following the Canadian Grand Prix. It's our 24-hour party people edition as well, with the 24 hours of Le Mans on this weekend as well. We'll preview that race for you a little bit later. We'll talk about the Canadian Grand Prix, of course, as well. Even though it was a bit of a boring race, there is still a lot to talk about, and we'll go over all the weekly news as well in the digest. So thanks for joining us as always. Jawad here with Baden. Canada, probably a bit of a doozy. We're kind of glad that we had the day off anyway on Monday to be able to recover from that, getting up early and everything. But Montreal masterclass from Sebastian Vettel to claim his 50th career win from pole position as well.
Absolutely, and against the grain it was for Ferrari. All that hype coming into the weekend, it was going to be another Mercedes walkover, and even I was quite surprised waking up Sunday morning thinking surely those silver arrows will lock out the front row, and quite taken aback to see that Hamilton down in P4, and really one of those anonymous Sundays, and that typical boorish attitude he had over the radio when he was never in contention. And on race day, I guess Vettel, he was never really troubled at all.
Yeah, exactly, and we'll go over Lewis Hamilton and Mercedes in a second, but for Ferrari, I guess it was quite emotional as well, the whole weekend being the 40th anniversary of the first win in Montreal by Gilles Villeneuve as well, being the home favourite, winning that, so it would have been a favourite special race for them. But for Ferrari, not having won in Canada since 2004 when the Michael Schumacher reign ended, I couldn't believe that stat either, that it's been that long since Ferrari had won there. So it was a good result for them all weekend. And for Vettel too, a circuit that he normally doesn't have much success at. 2013 had been the only win to his name that he had previous to this, and then 2011 we know what happened that year with the lead being lost in the final lap. So yeah, great result for Ferrari and for Sebastian Vettel. As far as championship points are concerned as well, he gets 1 point lead now heading into a crucial triple header with France, Austria and Britain coming up. So yeah, great result for them all round.
Yeah, I think really it was just important for them to not halt a slide as such. You can't say that they've completely lost the plot since those opening races, but circumstances conspiring against them recently, just about hanging on, and this one really puts them back on that course they were at earlier in the season. And the next after this weekend, 3 weekends on the bounce, that's going to be huge in the context of who enters the back half of the season already. It's hard to believe we're now a third of the way into it, and I'd say that Ferrari's very much, as it stands, they just look like they're a bit more, have a bit more inertia about them, whereas Mercedes just, you don't know what they're going to do. They just seem like the script really, it's very unpredictable from their end.
Well, with Ferrari, you could say that their car seems to be a lot more dialed into the different type of circuits that we've been to. So when you look at Seb's 3 wins, Albert Park, completely different circuit to Bahrain, for example, completely different circuit to Canada now here. So they've won on 3 different types of circuit, mix of high downforce, low downforce, power as well. This is typically the circuit that Mercedes have dominated because they've had the better power pack on board, but I guess not bringing that engine upgrade for them this weekend, in hindsight, may have cost them, which they will do next time out in France. But going on, I guess the race of procession as it ultimately was, Seb leading unchallenged from the front. We had Valtteri Bottas and Max Verstappen lining up second and third on the grid, and there wasn't much action between them apart from the start where Max tried to get one down the inside going into turn 1, and Bottas, as he normally does, defends really well coming out of turn 2, and from there on, I guess there was very little chance we could see those positions change, and it was a one-stop strategy as well for most drivers in that race too, which I guess Pirelli would have hoped that the tyres would have had a bit more degradation, 2-stop race perhaps, and you could see that that one-stop strategy was much to the fans' distaste, and there was a lot of criticism that came up after that as well.
Yeah, not for the first time this season that strategy is contra to the belief heading in on a Sunday. You see the qualifying results and you think everything would indicate to those multiple stops, and then it never quite comes to pass, and it just equates to a bit of a fizzler, you could say. And as far as those minor placings, certainly for Lewis Hamilton, when you see the Red Bulls, they did optimise it quite nicely, that strategy ultimately, and it does make you wonder, as far as that championship battle, it really keeps everybody guessing when we think, well, maybe a Ferrari or a Mercedes will utilise that second stop to perhaps overcut another car with fresher rubber, and it never seems to even have that opportunity to enter the equation.
Well, yeah, they all seem really keen on just conserving and trying to maximise a one-stop rather than take the risk and go over to a two-stop, which is what Pirelli and everyone would like them to see. And I guess Daniel Ricciardo, for example, he started sixth. He got the benefit of the undercut over Kimi Räikkönen and Lewis Hamilton and ended up fourth, I guess, in the end. But, Kimi and Lewis then didn't have anything in response to that, and as you suggested, perhaps taking a second stop for one of the guys, maybe if a safety car had came out late, that could have helped them there. But, there was no initiative, especially seeing as they weren't going to be, especially for someone like Kimi Räikkönen, where he's often
a surprise Ferrari gave him a dud strategy.
Well, if he's going to be the dummy car, why not take that initiative and see to get a couple of extra places back, put him on a two-stop or something. We're reaching that point in the championship, as you say, where points become crucial, and Constructors' Championship, is that in Ferrari's minds at all?
I don't know if it was Ferrari itself or the commentary team suggesting Ferrari's wary of any additional pit stops after the shambles of Bahrain.
Yeah, after Bahrain, what happened with the mechanic being injured, but I don't know if it's... I mean, I can understand their concern there, but I do believe it's a bit of an excuse, if you will. The sport is all about taking risks and everything, and it's not like... it was a freak accident what happened in Bahrain, and I don't think it's regularly going to see mechanics flying over the shop and everything. But for Ricciardo, good result there. Good result for Red Bull, finally. Third and fourth, a solid haul of points, which we haven't been able to say about them all season. I guess they've been boosted by that upgraded Renault power unit as well. We'll talk more about power units and Red Bull later on anyway. But, good result for them. Gets them a bag of points. Verstappen, I guess, a good weekend for him. He was fastest in all three practice sessions. Then I thought perhaps coming into qualifying he'd be able to take pole like Daniel did in Monaco, but that wasn't the case. He still qualified third, had a clean race, finished third. So I guess, going from where he was pre-race under a lot of scrutiny, he came out in the press conference and said if he had any more questions in regards to his crashes that he would headbutt someone. So it's good that he actually didn't do that and was using his head to have a solid weekend as far as being on the track.
And this talk afterwards being emphasised that he travelled solo minus that entourage of his father and co, whether this
it's mainly just the father
to make an impact on his results, and whether it's part of the ongoing plan just to remove any kind of distraction. But you can see that, racing aside, that was just the kind of weekend he needed, even though it wasn't anything spectacular, just enough there just to be stable and give him some kind of base to work around, because he's just been woefully inconsistent, or consistent in crashing, but not in picking up these handy podiums like Daniel Ricciardo does so often.
Well, yeah, it's very hard to avoid those questions, and I guess that's why a lot of people were offended by the remarks that he made about headbutting people in the media. I mean, it's a valid question, what is going on? Why are you crashing? I mean, you didn't hear Pastor Maldonado, for example, say that he was going to do a flying kick at someone if they keep asking about the crashes and whatnot. So there is a lot of expectation on Verstappen. He's in a position where he's been brought into Formula One off the fact that, he's a once-in-a-generation talent, and when he's not delivering, of course there's going to be scrutiny about it, because a lot of people have invested a lot in him. You've got media people who are following him, thinking that, he will be the next best thing or whatever, the next Ayrton Senna or Michael Schumacher, for example. So, of course, there's going to be a lot more pressure. And I guess perhaps that's just a bit of his immaturity coming to the fore there, where he says, oh, leave me alone. I'll headbutt you if you keep asking me. So, yeah, that's something that Verstappen, we're going to have to see him be moulded in that sort of fashion where he can deflect that without coming out in the fashion that he did.
Yeah, still a way off. Hard to believe he's not even, if he was in America, of the legal age. So he's probably a good, 25 is probably the point when drivers enter their prime. And as far as him just as an individual, he's coming still off a very immature base. And not to cut him any slack, but he probably does need to be wary that he's under the spotlight and save that kind of rhetoric for his own thoughts.
Yeah, I can understand the whole hype around it that, he will become the youngest world champion or whatever. Seb was 22 or 23, was it, when he won the first title in 2010? And Verstappen, I guess, still 3 years off that. So there's plenty of time for it. He doesn't have to rush to it now. But, I guess just the expectations that they've got seem a bit unrealistic and whatnot. So, yeah, you just got to sort of curb the enthusiasm, as Jackie Stewart said, leading up to the race in the week. And, just play it calmly. And we saw the result of that this weekend because he finished third on the podium after a solid weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. Enough said about Mr. Verstappen.
Yeah. Well, we could carry on about him anyway. But Lewis Hamilton, off weekend for him in general at his favourite circuit. He finished fifth in the end. As you say, when he's having a bad weekend or, he's on for a bad result, we hear it in his tone of speaking and everything. He just sounds miserable. And even during the race, the communications with his team, over the team radio with his engineer, just a bit heated and everything. He was flustered by the tyres not working for him, and just in general, nothing was working for him. So, yeah, I guess it's just a damage limitation result once again for Hamilton this weekend.
Yeah, I guess not being accustomed to that position, he's almost always been number one at Canada. If he's not retired, then he's won, I think, 6 or 7 times, and it's quite amazing to think he just seemed in a different race altogether and mentally just switched off, as he so often does anytime there's not a sniff of victory. And it's just peculiar when you think about how he was leading that standings until coming into the weekend. He really hasn't displayed any of those trademarks of someone who's in charge of his campaign, and it's just very much a race-to-race proposition for him. And of course, with that uncertainty until it is absolutely sealed for his own future beyond 2018.
Yeah, that too. We're getting to that middle point of the year where the driver contract situation will come more into the picture and everything, and from what we understand, it is a mere formality, I guess, between Hamilton and Mercedes to keep him there. But, as far as keeping, in charge of his campaign or whatever, I sort of look at it with a bit of caution as well, because around this time last year, you could have said that he was in a similar situation, but then come these middle races of the year, especially when we get to Europe, like Austria,
pretty much beyond Britain,
as well. It something clicks, and we saw that in 2016 as well when he was in that championship fight with Nico Rosberg, where he ended up winning 4 races in a row. I think it was in the month of July that they had from Austria, Britain, then Hungary, Germany. He won those 4 races in a row.
This year, can you believe it? We have 5 races in July.
Yeah, well, 5 races in a July. If he wins those, and there's something that Sebastian Vettel and Ferrari will be quivering about. But, yeah, we can't write Lewis Hamilton off until the very end, because as defeated as he sounds and everything, he's still quite dangerous, I feel, and that's something that we've learnt over the last few years watching him. He is a bit of a master of the mind games, so he's going to be playing this one very interestingly.
Yeah, no, I do think whenever that announcement does come, a little bit of speculation lately that it will be announced prior to France. Other train of thought will be that it will tie into his home event for Silverstone. Either way, that's within the next month. You think that the finality of that will, not that we're hoping Hamilton wins, we do want to see someone there take it all the way. to the Abu Dhabi finale, but whether it does have an effect on his performance once all that's taken care of.
Yeah, exactly. But more on Hamilton, I guess, another time anyway. Moving it on. Renault best of the midfield, as you would have expected. 7th and 8th, led by Hülkenberg over Carlos Sainz. Same opportunity missed by Force India, because we had both Renaults, both Force Indias qualify inside the top 10. Perez out of that little battle early, having clashed with Carlos Sainz.
He basically wanted Sainz hung, drawn and quartered and chucked over the bay there for that apparently Machiavellian stunt, which was really nothing more in it than just a normal racing incident after the safety car.
Yeah, just a minor racing incident, even though Perez was accused of far worse in 2014 with Felipe Massa. So getting a bit hot-headed there is Checo, newly married, of course, as well, coming out. So perhaps he's just a bit hungover from the wedding party and everything. But yeah, Perez unfortunately out of that points battle early. He was able to squander home somewhere outside the points. Esteban Ocon was solid again to finish in 9th for Force India. So, starting the season, Force India was tipped to be behind the likes of Renault and McLaren and Haas, but Force India, you had a Force India ahead of a McLaren and of Haas this weekend, which was good to see. And Renault have clearly established themselves as being at the head of that midfield, with that stranglehold on the 4th place in the constructors at the moment.
Yeah, Renault's solid, if not unspectacularly. You got to say that they're just doing what they need to. They're never looking like they got a chance of penetrating that top 6 without attrition, and all of those cars were lapped indeed by the top 6 runners, so they were in their own little race.
Well, that was something that was worth laughing over, is that the customer Red Bull Renault had lapped the factory Renault as well. Both cars had lapped both Renault cars, so that was something to laugh about, I guess, during the race as well. But yeah, you were saying?
Yeah, just for them, I don't know, they're probably still a year off being in that hunt for podiums, but they're obviously on an upward curve. And Force India, I guess, back in the day, that idea was that they would start the season hot and then fade away as the resources ran out. But this time it's contradictory to that off-track speculation about the future sounding very tedious. They continue to pick up these points, and as McLaren continues to slip off the ball after that decent enough start, they're looking like they could be in the hunt. And then with Haas as well, they've really not capitalised. Force India suddenly looking good for maybe 5th in the constructors.
Yeah, especially with those two big names like Haas and McLaren just losing points again this weekend, but more on them in a second. Anyway, we did have one safety car deployed at the end of the first lap, and that was after Brendan Hartley and Lance Stroll crashed out. So two big names, of course. The Kiwi finding himself on the wrong side, you could say, but that wasn't the only thing that happened. Lance Stroll had a bit of a moment himself, so he tried to correct, and then Hartley, I guess, just ended up in the wrong place at the wrong time. So good that there was no penalties dished out for it. But boy, with all the pressure that Brendan Hartley's been under, having qualified 12th with that upgraded Honda power unit, it would have been nice to have seen him finish in the points this weekend.
Yeah, he shows real glimpses, but he just gets unlucky in these moments, whereas Pierre Gasly, for the large part, tends to keep himself out of trouble, and it just gives further ammunition to those doubters. It seems like every weekend there's a new candidate, as we've mentioned, for probably the last month, and that talk, of course, Lando Norris could be loaned out, and even talk from Zach Brown that he'd be open to it if it was only a short-term deal. So that won't go away until Red Bull commits that Hartley can see out the season. And
yet Hartley says that he knows what's written in his contract, and it's clearly a case of Red Bull breaking that contract to get rid of him, which would be pretty unjust, you would say, in the legal.
Yes, but Red Bull's never been afraid to dice with jurisdiction and legalities, so it would be no surprise at all to see them happy to fork out whatever it costs to put the axe or the sky through another promising driver's career. Yeah,
well, as we said last week, it's just, I guess their expectations have been inflated a little bit by the result of Gasly in Bahrain. But anyway, it was just disappointing to see. And I guess for Stroll as well, it would have been disappointing being his home race, his home weekend, and being kicked out on the first lap. Williams again, woeful, nowhere to be seen. Stroll just has this habit, I guess, of every time he starts, he picks up places, which is good, but then there's nothing to come of it because the car is woeful. So,
yeah, I think for them it's just a manifestation of where things are at, and clearly overcompensating. You get to that point where you're just trying to make things happen, and probably a bit of a combination. Hartley probably shouldn't have been there in the first place, but Stroll just a bit clumsy in that part of the circuit. It's pretty notorious for if you get out on those marbles, then you're a bit of a passenger. And as far as they're concerned, again, we keep mentioning that they're just rudderless, and the talk that they're going to continue to develop the car, you do wonder what purpose that does serve.
Yeah, it's just a flawed investment, I guess, at that stage. But for Sauber, it's not the case because Charles Leclerc getting more impressive by the day, it seems. He finished 10th again. He had a battle with Fernando Alonso once again, like they did in Barcelona, even though Alonso unfortunately retired from the race with an exhaust problem, I think it was, on the McLaren. But yeah, another point there for Leclerc and the Sauber. And yeah, in the 7 races that he's contested this year or in his F1 career, he's already outscored Marcus Ericsson's tally of points, which was an interesting stat to pick up at the end of the weekend. So, great job there from Leclerc, and, just boosting his stocks ever so much. And, we don't think next year will be the year he gets the call up, but to Ferrari, that is. But, yeah, for 2020 or for 2021, he's looking like a shoo-in with the way he's performing.
Oh, you never know. Stranger things have happened. The longer that Daniel Ricciardo doesn't sign with anyone other than Red Bull, and Kimi Räikkönen just not necessarily underwhelms, but he just doesn't capitalise like Sebastian Vettel is, then Ferrari's got more to think about. And then Leclerc, you never know, could get a real fluky race where he drives the skin out of the car and other cars have issues. He could end up closer to that top 5, and that's the kind of result where they might really want to take a punt on him. But he's certainly already proven in not even double figures, 7 races, and he already looks like he well and truly belongs, like some don't establish over multiple seasons on the grid.
Yeah, exactly, which is really great to see from one of those junior drivers actually coming in and impressing rather than, the likes of Jolyon Palmer, for example, who really underwhelmed. Stoffel Van Dorn, I guess, hasn't had the rub of the green either in the year and a half that he's been in Formula One, which we hope that can change soon. But, yeah, it's nice to see when a junior driver comes in, picked on merit and everything, that they can perform. And it's not like Sauber are world beaters either. If you can outperform your machinery that you've got, then, yeah, you basically are earmarked to have a good future in the sport. So, great result there. It was unfortunate for Pierre Gasly, actually. He finished 11th in the race, but he was penalised and dropped to the back of the grid for a second change of power unit over the weekend. So he started off the weekend with a new one, then they found some issue with that, and then put the old one back in before qualifying. And then after qualifying, apparently Red Bull came over and said, well, we want to see how this power unit does on both cars during the race, so you're going to put the new one back in there and you're going to race that. And I guess for Honda and for Red Bull, it actually was beneficial, seeing as Hartley crashed out on the first lap. We couldn't see what he could do, but from 19th, Gasly up to 11th. So it goes to show you that, yeah, the Honda has made some gains, because he passed the likes of the Haas with the Ferrari, the Force India with the Mercedes. So great result there for him, even though there was no points to show for it.
I think Red Bull's dropped all pretense there, and all those indications are that it's a matter of when that announcement of collaborating with Honda will be confirmed. And for Toro Rosso, as much as they're showing that potential, they've got no other purpose than to be the trial runners for the longer term future. And who knows, once that decision's made, whether they can regain some of their autonomy. Yeah,
exactly. We'll talk more about that in a second anyway. But Roman Grosjean, I thought, was impressive too this time out after that sort of scare he had earlier in the weekend, crashing into a marmot during practice or whatever, which you sort of get. It's kind of like having the kangaroos out in Bathurst here. But for Grosjean, a late stop on the stint with the hypersoft tyres. He finished 12th in the end, best of the Haas guys. And I guess, he probably, even though there was no points to be had, he probably needed a weekend or a result like that after the bad luck that he's had so far this season.
Yeah, I think that as hard as it is to believe, it's probably his most impressive drive to date. And that's saying something from where those expectations were coming into his third campaign at Haas, and really a crossroads campaign for him, but it's just never come together. And this time out, he was compromised with that failure at the start of qualifying Q1, wasn't it? The
engine just went kaput coming out of the garage. So
I think that for him, he's again coming off a low base and just got to start somewhere, finish those races and stay out of trouble. And hopefully by that second half of the season, he's at that level where he can be dangerous. And just for Haas as well, that they've just had a disappointing year to date.
Yeah, well, not overly disappointing, but, the last few races haven't been great, considering the base that they had. Like Australia, again, was just unfortunate what happened with the pit stops. Then Bahrain, they were able to come out and get a result there with Magnussen at least. But then, we went back to the same idea of whether, we have a one-car team basically at Haas with Grosjean in that Gutierrez role this year. So we got to wait and see if they can get both cars into the points in these races that are coming up soon. But yeah, otherwise it's going to be costing them dearly as far as, rivaling Force India and the like is concerned. So sad for them in that respect. Sad for McLaren too, who overall had a pretty poor weekend. Van Dorn finishing 16th in the end. He was collateral, I think, on the first lap incident with Stroll and Hartley, so that compromised his race. And then, of course, Alonso, we already said, had that early retirement as well, exhaust out. Whether he actually just wanted to jump on a plane and fly to Le Mans straight away, who knows? But points went begging for them once again this weekend.
Yeah, and from that, now we can fight hype after Australia, just seems like it's diminishing returns for them. And even when they are, 6th or 7th, it's still not what they want. And for Stoffel Vandoorne, he just seems even further adrift. And I think, as I did mention coming into the year, that it would take till 2019 for them to realise any potential with Renault there. So this is just going to be another frustrating exercise for the balance of 2018 for them, just making the most of still pretty limited package there. And probably Fernando Alonso marking time. All those signs, as we're going to mention shortly, indicate a departure from Formula One. Yeah,
exactly, and we'll come to that in a second anyway. So yeah, just 1 point lead for Vettel coming out of this race, and then that triple header coming up: France, Austria, Britain, all back to back on weekends. It's going to be a busy one for us starting next weekend. But to cap it all off, I guess driver of the day. Where do we go? I mean, for me, hard to look past Vettel and his masterclass, I guess. He's not had the rub of the green in the past few races. I mean, up until Monaco, he hadn't been on the podium for about 3 races or whatever. So getting that win, reminding everyone that, he's still, probably the favourite in this championship to win. And Ferrari just looking so at home at a circuit which they haven't done so since basically 2004 when Schumacher won the last time there. So, I think Seb wins that one for the day.
Yeah, absolutely. It just seems as though that they're really assured of the direction they want to head in for the first time in a long time, and they haven't lost their heads after a few of those races where just things didn't quite work out, and they enter this little phase of the championship where if they can they don't have to win every race, but as long as they're right up there and then don't implode like 2017, then I think they're really going to be very hard to beat. They just seem like on any given weekend to to be up there, and it's only these little 1%ers which ever rule them out.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess just before we forget as well, heading into France, we'll probably talk about it more in depth in the preview anyway next week. But France is another race where, remember when Pirelli were changing their tread depths for 3 races and then Mercedes came out and dominated in Barcelona? Well, that's going to be a storyline going into France as well, because Paul Ricard's another circuit that Pirelli are going to have that lower tread depth on those tyres. So we'll see if that's another one that Mercedes can tick off.
Same again for Silverstone.
Yeah, so 2 races in 3 weekends where we're going to have those changed compounds of tyres. So let's go over the digest now, and I guess what you were saying before about McLaren and Fernando Alonso. So Zach Brown saying that a return to IndyCar is looking favourable now after this weekend. So we saw 2 weeks ago they were in Detroit at Belle Isle having the meeting with some of the IndyCar officials. Then this weekend in Canada, Michael Andretti was a guest of the McLaren team. I guess they've got their own partnership between Zach Brown and Michael Andretti elsewhere in the world, chiefly here in Australia with the Walkinshaw group. But all signs pointing towards McLaren returning to IndyCar. We don't know the specifics of it, whether it'll be their own operation that they have like a one-car team or something, or will they sort of subcontract it from one of the existing teams. What Zach Brown has said is that there is no animosity or conflict, I guess, if they were to link up with someone who's using Honda power, given their previous history, because HPD, the Honda Performance Development or whatever in the US, I guess, different to dealing with Honda directly in Japan, the ones that they were dealing with in Formula One. So it's an exciting prospect, I guess, and what we were saying last week too, that perhaps this will be Alonso's little ticket out of F1. He might be in IndyCar full-time next year.
Yeah, it's probably been a while coming, ever since that fabled Drive 2017, the Indy 500. He was always looking to make a return, and he's bided his time this season, given McLaren plenty of opportunity to come good with Renault, and that hasn't been realised yet. So he's within his rights to move on, just cut those losses at 37. He's at that age anyway where most drivers are just reaching that natural lifespan in Formula One, but that's not to say, you can't be competitive in these other series where you do see in sports cars, IndyCar and supercars, you're getting drivers well into their 40s, so this could just be a new lease of life for Alonso, and then who knows, you never could close the door on any kind of return to Formula One in that foreseeable future, but it's just at that stage where he'd be just wasting years where he could be having success in those other categories, and now's the perfect time to make that move. And for McLaren, it gives them that chance to bring in their own next generation. Well,
it's supposedly Nico Rosberg came out and said over the weekend that apparently none of the big teams have any interest in Alonso in F1 at the moment. Mercedes and Ferrari, well, I guess Ferrari, the door was closed when he left in 2014, and so Mercedes is probably the only team that would look at getting an Alonso, but they've got their own list of drivers that they'd wish to employ. So it just leaves Alonso in that unfortunate situation where, he is still a very competitive driver, as we've seen, but perhaps the door for him on F1 is about to close. And it's just McLaren, I guess, has let him down in this instance where they haven't had the car for 4 years now to put him in a position where he can indeed fight.
No, it's partly McLaren's doing and Alonso's, just a sequence of ill-timed moves. It could have always had a different trajectory all the way back to, I guess, when he joined McLaren in that first instance. Then when he did leave McLaren, went to Renault instead of taking that Red Bull or even Brawn bait at the end of the 2000s. He could have 5, 6, who knows how many titles, but he chose his own direction, and he has to live with it.
Or rather, Flavio chose it for him, and we know Flavio very well in the decision-making he does. But, for Alonso, I mean, there's going to be a lot to talk about with Alonso anyway over the coming days and weeks, months or whatever, until we get that decision on 2019. For now, I guess we just got to see how he goes at Le Mans this weekend. It's going to be a big weekend, and we'll preview that shortly anyway. But coming back to F1 World, and Yeah, Ross Brawn and F1 have extended an apology to model Winnie Harlow, who waved the checkered flag at the end of the race over the weekend in Canada. But there was a bit of a gaffe because it was waved 2 laps before the end of the actual race on lap 68. And a lot of people jumped on social media, and there was a lot of criticism saying, it was her fault. Why did they give her the flag to wave or whatever for a...
Well, it doesn't help when you do think of that stereotype of the model who knows nothing about F1.
Yeah,
and
you
then
know...
you just add one and one together and you
That's
think,
basically what happened in this instance.
Not much going on there, is
unfortunately, she was actually told by an FIA official that this is the final lap. So it was the FIA at fault in that instance or whatever, and she was the one who copped the flack. But it's nice of, I guess, for Ross Brawn and the F1 team to come out and make that apology, you know, if it's any solace for her reputation or whatever, if it took a hit amongst F1 fans or whatever over the weekend. I guess she was only doing it for a photo opportunity as well and whatnot. So regardless of that, what you say, you know, the stereotype, we shouldn't really look into it much. If they've come out and said that it was our fault, they put up their hands, then we've got to take the word for it and say, yeah, don't criticise the poor model there for it. You know, she was only doing what she was told.
I think the lesson is to maybe restrict these honours to perhaps start line. You could maybe push the button for that sequence of lights.
Yes,
not
you know,
when you're coming to a point where the race ends up being declared multiple laps early. And look who's, if anyone, nothing else, Daniel Ricciardo has the most right to be aggrieved. He's stripped of his prized and financially recompensed fastest lap there.
Oh yeah, that too, because he was in disbelief at the end of the race when Sky Sports or something told him that his teammate got the fastest lap award, so he just seemed like he was heartbroken. He was like, that's unbelievable. But we saw, this isn't the first time we've seen that anyway. A couple of years ago at the Chinese Grand Prix, that was ended a couple of laps early as well.
Thank God in that case. I think that was back in the dark days when Mercedes won every other race.
Yeah, so it was
doing us a favour.
Yeah, it was 2016 or 2015, I think, so it didn't really do any favours. But yeah, if it has the potential to change the outcome of the race, then it's something that's got to be, that's probably going to cause a furore if that ever happened. But as you say, it's something that maybe for the start of the race it's okay to do, to give that honour to a celebrity or to another athlete. As we see at Le Mans every year, we have like a celebrity or another sports person starting the race. This year we've got Rafael Nadal doing it off the back of another French Open victory as well.
I think you can trust him to get it right.
Fernando Alonso did it a couple of years ago as well at Le Mans and whatnot. I think Jackie Chan might have done it last year. So yeah, that sort of thing is fine, but perhaps checkered flag when you're calling the race, it's a lot more has to go into it, and they've got to be very careful because it is results we're talking about that could be damaged as a result of it. But anyway, let's move on. And Red Bull have come out and said that they're going to decide about their engine for 2019 by the Austrian Grand Prix. That's the words of Christian Horner, despite the fact that Renault are saying that they've already overextended their offer on the tables. It was supposed to be the 15th of May. They were supposed to have a decision, but now they said by the end of the Canadian Grand Prix. That would be great because you get to see Honda's new engine and get a correlation with their own data. And now Red Bull are just pulling the arm further and saying that, it's Austria, which is in 2 races' time.
Yeah, end of the month, so they've extended it by over 6-7 weeks.
But at the same time, people are criticising Renault here for being a bunch of whingers. Renault shouldn't even be giving them the upgraded engine because what Red Bull are doing is comparing Renault's notes with Honda's notes, and that's basically, benefiting the other party here. It's benefiting Honda here because Honda can look at all that data or whatever that Renault have. So, in an ideal world, they shouldn't even be letting them do that. But
it benefits Red Bull as well. They've almost got that complete 360 autonomy, so Renault's the only loser, and they just need to draw that line and say, no, you've had your 3 years of ambivalence and you haven't committed, and so what if you've got 2 years in limbo, re-put your soul.
But this is Renault also, if you want to talk about Renault being the, the whingers and everything. This is Renault still keeping good on a 12-year relationship that, yes, it's become very fractious in the last few years and whatnot, but them still not forgetting that they had all that success together, whereas Red Bulls, with their short memory, seems to have forgotten about it.
A lot of goodwill from Renault's part, and again, just showing they're a class act, despite the fact they have had their issues since the hybrid era did commence. Red Bull, they just want to really have the best package on the day, and regardless of any kind of history, where you could recreate it if both parties bring their equal contribution, but that's not the way it seems to work with this particular organisation.
Yeah, it doesn't. We could talk all about Red Bull all day. Anyway, we won't do that anyway. We'll move it on. Unfortunate news coming out of the Spanish Moto3 Championship as well over the weekend, with 14-year-old Andres Perez killed in an accident that happened at Turn 5. So there'll be a lot of heavy hearts heading into the actual Barcelona round of MotoGP this weekend as well with that news. So yeah, unfortunate, promising talent coming through the ranks, and at the age of 14 as well. It's not what you want to be hearing.
I think that's the biggest takeaway, and it just makes you question whether maybe that is a bit too young. Like maybe 16 would be where you have that threshold just to be dealing, even at that lowest power category of the three there. You can see that are they ready for it in any capacity, and especially a circuit like Spain, which is it's pretty demanding and pretty unforgiving on anyone who makes a mistake.
Well, it's this. In 3 years, it's the second death we've had in Grand Prix motorcycle racing, because 2016 it was Moto2 rider Louis Salom who crashed and lost his life at, I think it was where they've put the chicane in there now, the penultimate corner. Originally in MotoGP there was no chicane there like there is in F1, but they've had to put that chicane there, that as they do in F1 for MotoGP, because it's such a high speed approach, and that's where he lost his life. So yeah, it's a bit of a sad one there. So hopefully everything goes okay for the riders this weekend in the 3 MotoGP championships, and I'm sure they'll pay tribute to the young Spaniard.
Yeah, absolutely. Just coupled with the multiple fatalities at the Isle of Man, it shows you that these people, they go out there, much more realistic proposition of not coming back than you would see these days in any other closed, quasi-closed cockpits, F1, IndyCar, NASCAR, whatever. These guys, it really does bite you hard.
Yeah, motorsport is dangerous. That's what it says on the back of your ticket and everything, and that's the reality of it, unfortunately. To V8 Supercar land now as well, and it's good that it's back underway this weekend in Darwin as well after a bit of a layoff. But I guess the Enduro Cup field, has been confirmed as well, with Big Mate Racing, Todd Hazelwood getting Super 2 regular and Bryce Forward into the car for him, so that confirms the field. There is a few asterisks against a couple of names, but you expect them to be racing like Jono Webb, for example, for Techno and all that. So yeah, it's another promising endurance campaign that lies ahead. We're in that crucial middle third of the season now where we had a promising start to the year. Holden dominated, then Ford were able to take it back with DGR Team Penske, and McLaughlin got on a roll. Now Fabian Coulthard won the last race that we had, so perhaps he's back in the hunt now as well. So the next few races, Darwin, Townsville, Ipswich, and then the night race in Sydney, they're going to be crucial ones to see who can be in that mix going into the endurance campaign. We look at guys like Triple Eight, they need to win, have a good weekend. Even David Reynolds in the Erebus car as well needs to claw back some points, maybe get another win or two under his belt, and be in contention coming into Enduro time.
Yeah, after that little lull there, it happens in fairly rapid sequence, that run into the Endurance Cup, and you can see that these sort of street circuits, the Townsvilles, Darwins and the like, they're quite unforgiving, and those big teams tend to be the ones that emerge on top here. So I think that for anyone there, like an Erebus or, dare we say, Walkinshaw, if they want to have any chance of putting themselves in unlikely contention, they just have to be consistent through these next 3 to 4 rounds.
Well, Nissan was strong at Darwin a few years ago as well. So, they've had a strong run this year. Could they be in contention again to take some points away from those championship contenders? But yeah, you got to see it's going to be between DJR, Team Penske and 888 as always. So that'll be great to see when that gets underway again in a few days' time. And time to talk about the 24 Hours of Le Mans, which is the biggest race of the year, you could say, arguably. It's going to be bigger this year with some big names. How many times have I said big in that sentence? I hope no one's counting. Fernando Alonso, of course, being that headliner. Jenson Button this year as well for S&P Racing in the LMP1. Then Juan Pablo Montoya with United Autosports in LMP2. But then you've got Felipe Nasr, Guido van der Garde, some of the big GT names, the Aussies in Matt Campbell, Alex Davison. The list just goes on. 60 entries this year, and just the names that they've got it's just incredible.
Yeah, and it flies in the face of those withdrawals in the past 24 months to think that they've still been able to retain and to attract these identities from other big motorsporting categories across the world. You can see that it still has that pull there, and different again within the 24-hour Le Mans, even though LMP1's been considerably weakened, you can still see there's a lot to play for, and arguably more of the attention will be on those lower categories into the GT categories. Yeah,
we'll talk a bit about GT in a second anyway, but even though Toyota are the overwhelming favourites, and we heard before as well that Kaz Nakajima in the number 8 car, which is Alonso's car, took provisional pole overnight for the race, so that's a good start for them. Even though they're the overwhelming favourites, plenty can happen in 24 hours, and this is why it's just no 6-hour endurance race where Toyota can, from lights out to checkered flag, dominate. 24 hours presents a different challenge, and we've seen what happened to Toyota in the last few years, where reliability comes into the picture. These cars, as technically marvellous they still can't go the 24-hour distance because there is something that can always go wrong. Like it could be a 1 cent piece part that just fails or whatever, and that can ruin the whole complexion of the race. So this is why there is the chance for a first privateer win in a while at Le Mans. You got cars like the number 1 Rebellion or whatever boasting Andre Lotterer, who's won 3 Le Mans in the past, Neil Yarny, who's won a Le Mans in the past, Bruno Senna, who's a well-credentialed driver, then Jenson Button, of course, in the LMP1 SMP entry as well, with Vitaly Petrov and former IndyCar driver Mikhail Alation. So plenty of talent there on the grid, and plenty of chance too for these privateer entries, the non-hybrids or whatever, to get in contention. Because if something goes wrong with Toyota, which you don't want it to for the sake of Alonso winning, but if it does, then these guys will be there to capitalise. And then we look at the LMP2 field as well, 20 entries. It's pretty massive, with guys from the ELMS series, the European Le Mans Championship and the American Le Mans Championship joining those WEC regulars as well. So it'll be a lot to play, even just in the prototypes, before we get to GT land.
Yeah, I think that's more of the intrigue when you see these rare, occasions where they unite different categories from sports cars under that one prestigious race, and it just shows you that depth that is there, and really through the nighttime hours, depending where you're watching, when the drivers really earn their money. And it doesn't matter if you're LMP1 through down to the amateur classes, that they're all clearly going into that unknown. It doesn't matter how much experience you might have. If you can get it right, then you've got a good chance of coming out the other side when the day and the sun rises again for a chance of honours.
Yeah, if you make it to the following morning, then you're in with a shot. But even still, we've seen last lap thrillers and whatnot over the last few years. Toyota, of course, losing it on the last lap, you could say, in 2016. But then last year in the GT class, we had a final lap battle between the Astons and the Corvettes, I think, and Aston Martin ended up triumphing there. So, and quickly while I was talking about prototypes too, it was great to hear the news last week come out and say that the new regulations for prototypes at Le Mans and the WEC after 2020 and 2021, they're looking at introducing the hypercars. So hypercars, of course, like the big names, the LaFerrari from Ferrari, McLaren P1 and Porsche 918. And then even you could include Brabham as well with their new car in the mix as well. An opportunity to get these manufacturers back involved in a more cheaper way than doing the hybrid prototypes. But that could be McLaren's chance to get back into endurance racing in Le Mans, Ferrari as well. That would be great to see if it actually gets pulled off.
Yeah, all of them. Mercedes as well can't be discounted. They can all really have a run, and whether that ties into the future of, say, Formula One, they have that, I guess, synergy across the field, opens up again that reciprocal idea that all these guys from other categories will be able to go and try their hand at events such as, even if it was just a one-off for a Le Mans, then that's just a logical candidate, and it's all, I guess, fiscally you could say responsible that all of those resources could be pulled together, since they're working around a basic sense of regulations which applies from Formula One into sports cars. They have that technology there which can be cross-shared.
Well, yeah, the Formula One technology was ultimately what inspired McLaren to make the P1 hybrid LaFerrari as well, and then Mercedes with their Project One, which is still in development at the moment. But yeah, that's all inspired by Formula One technology, and the list of hypercar manufacturers goes on. Bugatti, could they even make a prototype version of the Chiron, which is quite impressive on its own on the road? Koenigsegg, the list just goes on. So yeah, I think it'll be great if they can implement that. It'll be like the 90s or whatever with the GT1 regulations that they had with Le Mans as well, and we saw Mercedes, of course, take part in that infamously with the car that just liked to fly off the ground and whatnot. So, but going back to this year's Le Mans anyway, with the GT grid as well expanded. On the GTE Pro side of thing, we've got four GTs, we've got 4 Porsche 911s, because the two that are in WEC normally have had 2 more added to them from the IMSA Championship as well. They'll come in. Then the Corvettes as well, the 2 cars that they have with the likes of Jan Magnussen and Oliver Gavin, of course, Marcel Fessler joining the grid. At BMW, the first time they've been back at Le Mans as well in the GT class. And then Ferrari, of course, competitive as always. And over the week, there's been a boost from Aston Martin as well with their new Vantage that was sort of underwhelming at Spa, but they've had a balanced performance boost too, which will hopefully put them in contention for the win as well. And those cars with their lime green liveries, they look pretty stunning, so I'll be rooting for them for sure in the GT class. And then, of course, Matt Campbell, Alex Davison in GTEM racing in separate Porsches, so it'd be great to see one of those guys win in the class there as well.
Yeah, again, just great to see across all the categories, even if you mightn't be particularly invested in every class to the extent you might for a Formula One or supercars. There's always an identity there or a car which it's amazing. You see their own technologies involved to varying degrees through like 5-6 different classes we do have, that they're all a testament, I guess, to their own ability to get themselves this far into it. And again, it's not something for the faint-hearted to get to this point.
Yeah, across the 4 classes, I guess, it's easy to get behind anyone and just enjoy the race, the spectacle. I keep saying it's one I definitely want to go to in the near future for attendance or whatever. And, who knows? The 90th edition coming up in a couple of years' time, or even the 100th in about 12 years, I think it is. That'd be great to tick that one off the box as well. So hopefully everyone stays safe over the weekend and we have a great race. And good luck, I guess, to Fernando Alonso. Can he tick that box and complete the Triple Crown? But interestingly, speaking of the Triple Crown, Montoya actually is on the precipice of winning it if he wins this weekend, but he's in an LMP2 car, and that might be a bit difficult. He needs a lot of drama to happen up front for him to be in contention, but it's on the table. He has the opportunity to do it if he can win the race outright, so that would be interesting to see. So let's cap it off, I guess, with our sporting moments of the week as well. And big week it has been in sport. you probably know where I'm going to go with this anyway. We were in attendance of the Queen's Birthday AFL fixture between Melbourne and Collingwood, of course. It was a great day, great game actually to watch as well. Very competitive, even though Melbourne sort of just lost it sort of midway through it. But for me, it was Mason Cox who had the best performance on ground. 5 goals to his name. Just every time he stuck his big mitts out, he was able to get the ball. He, from what you say, he's not always this competitive and this much on form, but he does like to turn it up for those big games and whatnot. The big crowd of 83,000 didn't really faze him.
Yeah, particularly in your presence there, that resonance to you
Oh,
with the fabled 46. You can see it was meant to be. He was clearly putting on a show, just so it means you're going to have to be in attendance every game now for wanting encore performances.
As long as you can pay for my ticket, I can guarantee Collingwood will win the flag this year with Mason Cox winning.
Desperate times.
Yeah, it's been how long now since you've won? 2010, wasn't it? The last one?
Yeah, it feels a bit longer the way that all the competition moves ahead. So it's good to see. As competitive as Collingwood's been, I think any time in Nathan Buckley's 6.5 season tenure, and they just look like they're so assured now, and not being really ambivalent, kicking it to each other, not knowing what kind of strategy they want to employ, and it was just a really appealing, attractive brand of football, coupled with the whole occasion with the big freeze there. You can see it's really up there as probably just behind Anzac Day and to an extent the Dreamtime game in the home and away season as the most attractive on that fixture. Yeah,
it's the way that they presented that was incredible, and big respect to Neil Danaher as well, of course, who's fighting the motor neuron disease, and the money that they're raising every year to raise awareness for it for anyone who's diagnosed with it. Unfortunately, as we see him deteriorate year in, year out, he's still got that fighting spirit, and to actually get a glimpse of him in the flesh as well, and then to actually see him there and speaking while doing the pushing people off the slide and everything was really warming, and just you get the glimpse of a proper fighter, a proper warrior who's standing up to this disease, which other people have fought it. Stephen Hawking, how long did he get with motor neuron disease? He's practically had it most of his life before he tragically passed away earlier this year. So a lot of respect to Neil Danaher, but the whole big freeze, I guess, what do you call it? The whole circus, I guess, just seemed really great this year with the coaches going in with their dress-ups on and everything, the Scott brothers or whatever going as each other, John Longmire, the jockey. So it was a lot of humour put on it as well, I guess, which is great, and it's a spectacle. That's the word I was looking for.
Chris Fagan paid the ultimate price. Ended up he tore his hamstring off the bone, apparently tendons with it, so he's got a bit of a rehab ahead of him, but I'm sure he'll think about it and say it was worth the pain.
Reverend Fagan, you could say, doing the old Neil Danaher thing. And who else was there? Mark Robinson, our favourite, being dressed up by Alan Richardson, the St Kilda coach, with the suit that's 2 sizes too big, of course, as well. That was pretty funny.
Yeah, Leon Cameron is perhaps Nigel Mansell in the Ferrari attire.
Yeah, well, tying it back to F1, that was my immediate reaction. From the back, he almost looked like Nigel Mansell. He should have just put on the mustache as well and would have been full-on Nigel there. But yeah, no, it was a great day out and great sporting moment for the week, the whole game itself, if not just for Mason Cox's performance on the weekend. But yeah, good luck for the rest of the season, because it looks like it could be good by this weekend, and then 3, you would think, easy games coming up, which should keep...
Easier said than done, but if they play like they did on Monday,
well,
it's hard to see them dropping those.
If you lose to Carlton and Gold Coast, that would be pretty disappointing, wouldn't it? So...
Yeah, I think everything indicates that they've just got that consistency they've been lacking for a long time.
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, that's enough for football and for this edition, I guess, this week. We'll be back next week to preview the French Grand Prix, the first time since 2008. We've got a French Grand Prix on the calendar. Le Mans will be there to wrap up. State of Origin 2 next week as well will be exciting, so plenty to talk about. And we hope you enjoy the weekend of motorsport, even though F1 isn't on. And we'll see you guys next time.
Till then.